Good afternoon, welcome to RDB Chess, where today we'll be looking at a classic game between the 3rd and 5th world champions, if I have it right, Euwe-Capablanca with the black pieces, Max Euwe with the white pieces. The game's from the first round of the London 1922 International Tournament. Capablanca and Euwe hadn't played previously, and Max Euwe at 21 was already the Dutch champion. He showed some very interesting games in the event, but he finished only 11th out of 16 players with a result of -4. Capablanca ended up winning the tournament resoundingly. So while there is a bit of a difference in class at the time, and Euwe hasn't really come into his own, Capablanca is riding high following the 1921 World Championship, which he'd won against Emanuel Lasker. So the game starts following a game from said World Championship with a Roy Lopez. Main opening at the time was probably the Queen's Gambit declined, but Capablanca followed this variation. Obviously this isn't the modern Berlin, which has knight takes e4, d4, and then they make a draw. This is the old Steinitz defense, which is quite an interesting manoeuvring approach, but it has fallen out of favour severely at the top level. So here the game is following Lasker-Capablanca game 12. Well, this is all normal enough. Should be 7, rook e1, castles, and here the bishop retreats. Rook e8, f3, and this is where the game differed from Lasker-Capablanca game 12. In that game, Capablanca played bishop f8, and he didn't like his position, though he eventually drew the game. In this game instead, he played 10, knight takes d4, and here black is already doing reasonably well. Queen takes d4, plays bishop e6. So Capablanca's problem here is that all of these pieces on the back rank are kind of, they're reasonably strong in theory, but none of them are really on their optimal squares yet, and they do need to look at repositioning. So he plays bishop e6, which is potentially planning to put the knight on d7, the bishop on f6, and then maybe to play g6, bishop g7 at some point, and have the bishop snugly fianchettoed, or simply to keep it on f6 and continue to exert pressure on the queen side. So to counter this idea, Euwe plays queen f4, not queen f4, queen f2, which means that if Capablanca continues with his plan, so knight d7, f4 can be played immediately and threaten to trap this bishop, forcing black to react a little more drastically and play something like f6, which you really don't want to play. Well, it's an interesting novelty. And here Capablanca responds instead with c6. So he's just looking to create some more manoeuvring space for his pieces, and especially his queen here. So here Euwe plays a slightly odd move, bishop d2. Obviously bishop e3 just looks a lot more active, and Marozzi, who annotates the game, suggests that after bishop e3, queen a5, it was felt that this would just be an equal position, which is probably true, but nonetheless, obviously if you're playing a worse move than the one that gives you an equal position, you might have a worse position. So after bishop d2, Capablanca continues with queen b6, offering an exchange of queens. Euwe is obviously keen to avoid queen takes b6, a takes b6, where despite the double pawns, black is probably better because he has control of the a file, and eventually these double pawns can even become useful, potentially sort of marching forwards on the queen side. So instead of this, Euwe again does something a little bit unusual in the opening, and he plays knight a4. So I mean, the notion here is to either force black's queen to retreat or to exchange on f2, which brings white's king into the centre for the endgame. But actually, Capablanca embraces the opportunity to do this, playing queen takes f2, which exploits the tempo wasted by the knight coming to the edge, and also how misplaced that knight ends up being. So after king takes f2, Capablanca immediately strikes in the centre with d5. See, it helps that the knight's no longer defending that position, and that by trying to tangle with this queen on b6, Euwe has taken his eye off the sort of central control. So yeah, after taking on d5, black can recapture with any of his pieces, or probably the pawn as well, and I think his position looks quite nice. Instead, Euwe opts to play e5, forcing the knight to retreat to d7. And now Euwe makes a mistake. He plays g3. So if you want to pause the video for a moment and see if you can win a pawn, be back in just a second. Okay, so the tactic here is not... I don't think it's a tactic that people would miss at a top-level tournament today, but you see a lot of tactics like it deciding the games between the stronger and the weaker players in London 22. And the tactic here is very attractive. So it starts with bishop f5, threatening the pawn on c2. Obviously you can't advance that pawn to defend it, because b5 would then trap this knight, which has obviously got no squares. So instead you have to play rook ac1 to defend the pawn. And after this, play b5 anyway. The knight retreats to c3. Note that bishop f5, that's cleared one of the bishops out of this file. And after b5, knight c3, you can clear the other bishop out of the file, also with a gain of tempo, because it comes with a check. And after king g2, knight takes e5, and black has won the pawn. Morozzi just stops his annotations here, but I think this is where the game actually becomes really... obviously black's pieces are placed fantastically, he's got the extra pawn, he's doing very well, but the conversion is where I think Capablanca really shows his level of class and how beautifully he's able to manoeuvre and reposition his pieces to take their maximum effect in the middle game. So here Euwe lashes out with g4. We've got two choices for the bishop. It can either come back to d7 or maybe even c8, or it can go back to g6. I would probably chicken out and move it to d7 because you're maybe a little nervous that over on this side it will suddenly end up getting completely cut out of the game by a series of pawn advances. But Capablanca retreats it to g6 with confidence. And here Euwe plays king g3. Capablanca plays h5, just to prevent any possibility of playing, h4, h5 and causing any problems for the bishop, as well as obviously if you trade here, this king has no shelter and black gains much more advantage from the opening up of the king side than white does. So here, after h5, Euwe plays bishop f4. Capablanca simply plays f6, cementing the position of the knight on the central e5 square. Bishop takes, a bit desperate, but what else to do? then f takes. And now in this position, you've got to sort of look at what black's aims are. His aims are to double his rooks on the half-open f-file and target this weakness on f3. He also wants to relocate his bishops to useful central squares and diagonals where they have an influence over the white king side especially. So the way he accomplishes this is very smooth. So overplays bishop d3, offering to exchange bishops. Capablanca wants to keep his bishop pair, so he plays bishop f7, g5, g6, just to stop g6 being played. Rook e2, bishop d6. So we're now threatening, obviously, e4 with check and taking the bishop on d3. So here the king has to run back to g2. And king g7. I really like this move. It's just, effectively, what he's done in these last two moves, in addition to making that threat, he's covering these two pieces sort of prophylactically to give his other pieces greater ability to maneuver. So after rook c2 e1, rook e7. Now, I'm a simple individual, and I would have every time just put my rook on f8, my other rook on e8. How bad can it be? This rook e7 maneuver is really nice because it's after knight d1, allows your other rook to come to f8, knight to f2. You can see this knight has moved 5 times in order to reach this square where it's completely dominated by these pawns, by the pawns. It's got no useful squares. So here, he uses the escape square bishop e8. Again, that's why the rook came to e7 in the first place, so he can double on the f-file. b3, and Capablanca's achieved this complete transformation of the position where both of his rooks are on their optimal square. The white rooks, although they're also doubled on a half-open file, the pawn there is protected by a bishop, so it can't really be attacked. And here after c4, which is obviously the only active plan, if you play something like rook e3 to defend the pawn, d4 comes, rook is to run back, and just take the pawn. It's simple enough. So instead, c4 gets played, rook takes f3, c takes d5, c takes d5. And now the bishop retreats prophylactically, just because you don't want d4 to come with, e4 to come with tempo, and then, yeah, this would be extremely bad if these pawns started advancing. So after bishop c6, and now we can see the final piece, the bishop has come to this amazing diagonal. Obviously, if you move on the rooks to the c-file to threaten it, the bishop can just drop back to a8, for instance. And after rook d1, Capablanca makes this nice little retreating move, rook 3 to f4. So after the bishop finally comes to... And yeah, this move also allows the possibility of this discovered attack here. Again, just mercilessly advancing these pawns. Euwe plays bishop e4 with a nice little pin in order to physically stop the discovered attack. However, here Capablanca just steps out of the pin. After knight d3, Capablanca finishes the game with the move d takes e4. And And this is a wonderful little sort of finishing combination, because now if the black knight recaptures the bishop, then there is a mating combination, rook g4 check, obviously king h3, rook f3 mates, or if the king goes to h1, can play e3 check, and black has to give up material. Black can't even give up material, it's just getting checkmated here. With the two rooks controlling the two files, and the bishop along the long diagonal, and putting pieces in the way doesn't help. Well, that's a wonderful example of sort of Capablanca's ability to look at a position, work out where his pieces should be, and just very efficiently reshuffle them all into this crushing attacking formation. Extremely fine example of positional play from the third world champion. Thank you for watching. Do like and subscribe if that's your kind of thing. I'll see you next time.